Hello and welcome. I'm your humble host Lothran, and this is the second story in the Stalktober Special. There's so much work to be done, and it can't be done alone. So for this episode, I'll hand you off to my co-host Brumble while I go take care of something else. He'll finish up the remainder of this episode, all by himself. Brumble, take it away.
Hello, I'm Brumble. I was late. I was working on other story stuff. My apologies. I researched this story myself from Lothran's notes. He is right, there's so very much to do. So much. Oh, so much work. We're crazy. And so, grab a snack, settle in, get comfy. This is Respect the Elders. Tark pulled his tome of choice off of the shelf. He picked it out with a keen eye earlier in the day. His tutor had brought him by this line to organize and clean the shelves. Don't touch any of the books, he was chided for the 1000th time, sighing in upon himself when it occurred. He hefted it back to the table with his two friends, Anand, who held an animus ignis in his hand, keeping their little alcove brimming with just enough light to read, but not enough to give away their position. And Raul was just sitting back at the desk after returning his book, a treatise on the proper care and restoration of weapons. Tark did have to hand it to his friend. It was a much more interesting read than it had sounded at first. Placing his book upon the table, Tark read the label he'd already memorized. Ab emo corporis. The other two oohed, but in a hushed way, so as not to alert any patrols that might meander close to them. The tutors kept shifting their paths through the library at night, but they kept to the main corridors most of the time, avoiding nooks like these as much as possible. Everyone has a little bit of laziness in their hearts. It wasn't out of the question to be discovered, so the lads kept their voices low and the light as dim as they dared. The tutors weren't the only things prowling the halls during the night, or so they were told over and over again with great insistence. It's about Tabor, Tark said while speaking as softly as he could manage and still sound impressive. Raoul nodded in approval while Anand began slowly shaking his head. Oh, come on, Anand, we both sat through your book. That's totally different. I picked a good one that won't rip out our insides and feast on our torn flesh, leaving nary a trace before any of the elders find this spot. Anand made it clear he wanted to shout, the little Ignis in his palm flickering with the savage emotions he did not openly reveal to his friends. Meals, common and obscure, was not a good book, Annan," Tark replied, crossing his arms over his chest. He tried to stare his friend down, but Ral intervened for the sake of their friendship. "We follow our rules, alright? We all agree or we don't read. We need to get ahead of the other students, but we can't risk our lives in the process. If we deem a book too dangerous, we don't read it. End of discussion. Unanimous or nothing." Ral recited the contract all of them had agreed to. "I will vote first. I think we read the first chapter, like we did with Measures and Means of a Sinner, before, we decide if it wasn't for us, which we did, okay? We could do the same here. It's not a big deal." Tark nodded silently, placing his hand next to Ral's on the cover of the tome, keeping his vote silent but assured. They would read, but only until they felt they were in some form of danger. Then they would stop, if anything. Annan took a long while making his decision, seemingly having no trouble at all holding aloft their light. He'd always been better than the others at forming them in his mind. Finally, and with great trepidation, he lowered his hand onto the cover with the last few words for his friends. "We read, but when we get to the end of the chapter, we decide where to go from there. Got it, Tark?" Tark gulped and nodded, remaining silent, wondering if he'd made some sort of terrible mistake. Ral was the one who opened the cover, who brought the book toward himself, the one who would read. He'd read all the other books. A talented verbum servastra. He'd project the words as he read them into his two friends' heads, so they could all read the same book in the same instant. It's blank. Ralph flipped through the pages, finding nothing at all. There's nothing in it. He turned to his friends, staring at each of them in turn. "Have we ever found a blank book before?" "We've copied books, but Monk Gorman makes sure they're accurate before they go to get shelved. He and his team pore over them for weeks looking for a single error." Annan replied, sitting back on the bench, stretching his aching limbs, watching both of his friends grip and examine the tome between them, feeling very unsure with what was about to occur. Tark pulled his hands back, slumping into folded arms. "My bad, guys. We should probably stop for tonight anyway." Tark pushed himself back off the desk, reaching for the book. A hand, dark, covered in crackling, peeling paper-like skin, pushed Tark away from gripping the book he'd pulled from the shelves. But the hand remained watching him as his eyes slowly filled with dread as they scanned what was before them. Ral was being gripped by more hands, several pairs holding, binding, gently caressing at the cloth of his pupil robes. So many hands pouring forth from the cover of the book. The tome wriggled under the force of so many limbs pouring forth from it. "This is freaking me out, Ral," Anon somehow shouted while still whispering towards his friend. "This is freaking you out!" Ral shot back as he struggled against the arms and the single orb-eyed face emerging from the cover of the book. All eyes lead back. A whisper like that of death the moment after it takes you came from the monster's dagger-filled mouth. "Stop it!" Anon shouted, but still sort of quietly, blazing his Ignis as bright as it would go. From where he stood, Tark had a very strange view of the shining ember. Its glare did penetrate the darkness, but only to a point. An orb of gleam in a sea of infinite, shrouding nothingness. He knew it then. They were fucked. As fucked could ever get. And it was them. Silence. And the three of them were, and knew they could no longer speak no matter how much they desired to act. Good. Excellent. Listen close. Precious Phileas. Another hand emerged from betwixt the pages of the tome, still closed, a single talon-tipped finger tapping Ral on the center of his forehead. "You know not the limits that have been bent and broken to seek out one so potest as thine flesh. So much done, so much seen, and now, by accident and pride of other, here and somehow this such sweet irony, such disaster to my wills. Ral's face looked like he had already emptied all of his insides into his robes and was trying to find a little more just for good measure. Tark and Anon exchanged glances, having no idea what to do with themselves. Such terror as had snuck into their minds to seal each of them in motionless coffins of their own flesh. Two more heads emerged from the first circular face, each holding singular black eyes leaking some sort of dark liquid upon the table. To you, a new eyeless, mouthless face stretched in Tark's direction. And you, another head erupted with a sinuous neck out and up towards the tallest of them. Anon, keep this one safe. Trials. tribulations. But without this one, neither of you shall suffer another moment of waking nightmare. All the heads stretched at that point where their mouths should be. Then all the hands and all the skin and all the darkness and all the heads retreated into the book as fast as they had come forth in a terrible vortex swirling through the room and shaking the shelves and the chair that Ralph sat within. The entire world seemed intense with the sudden immaculate light, sucking down into the book that imploded where it sat, dissolving into smoke, dissipating but for one last breath, sucked deep into Ralph's panicked lungs. What in the unholy fuck is going on here? Tell me right now! And so it is. Sadly, we've come to the end of this tale. I have been Brumble, and this was another story from the heart of the Jakuls. There's work to be done, so we must be quick. Leave your comments down below. Like and share to help us grow, and feed a hungry Brumble. That's me. And don't forget, we encourage each and every one of you to stay safe out there.